Hi, everybody. And here in South Africa, we are at the end of another day this Wednesday, and elsewhere. Good morning to everybody. Good morning to you in the US. Good evening, and I suppose it's actually quite a late night in Australia. So I'm sure you'll be joining the recorded webinar or what's that. But you're all very welcome, and it's great to be with you. My name is Etienne from Walt. The CEO of Neurozone, also co-founder, and my background being neurology puts me in a clinical position and a clinical perspective, giving a clinical perspective on this world of business, which I find extremely fascinating, very humbling, wonderful to really look at how we behave, what we can learn from how we behave, and how we can integrate that behavior into the world of business, but from a clinical, biological, neurobiological perspective, where we link the neurobiology, neurophysiology, and of course the neuropsychology, organizational, psychological components together, all in a pot, if you may. And from that came the Neurozone, the behavioral code for high performance, which stems from the model of brain performance. So there's an interesting field that I've been very privileged to be involved with right from the start, which is about 8 years ago when we really started to work on the model and on the code, which is continuously evolving. And now we are ready to provide something of value to all of you who are experts in your field of integrating the behavioral components into the human capital, human beings for high performance. Whether you are coaches or OD specialists or academics in the field, it's great to have you here with us, and it's great to also participate with you towards the end of this masterclass to really learn from you and learn from each other. So today's topic is all about the symbiosis of resilience and self-leadership. Now, you'll probably know this from the previous masterclass as well, when we talked about this synchronous dance between resilience and complex problem solving or innovation capacity, that we are really focused on this idea that the brain-body system is indeed a system, and that these very important constructs that we reduced or reductionistic came up with, which are extremely valuable for us because we do think reductionistic. Indeed, it's worthwhile to see them as an intricate whole and to try to understand how they affect each other and one another. And that's something that we are really very interested in, is to try to almost put Humpty Dumpty together again. As you know, that's not possible. So, but maybe I can find a better metaphor to try and really find the way that this wonderfully complex, intricate brain-body systems of individuals and the collective, the group brain, the team, the organization, work together seamlessly in such a way that it really promotes not only our high performance, but our survival, our longevity, our thrivability, so that we have long and flourishing lives and coexist in this state, not necessarily being happy and la-di-da and hoo-ha all the time, but really being in the state where we are in a baseline relaxed physiological state, which is a state where the whole system maintains itself, which is so important to prevent illness and to prevent you and me from visiting my ex-colleagues. So I think that's something which we really want to work very hard on. Having said that, I think it's time for me to share the screen and to really start to look into the subject with you, resilience and self-leadership. I'm going to repeat a few things that I have talked about in the previous month. It feels like last week, but it's been 4 weeks. And let me share some of those thoughts on the resilience again, and then we'll talk about self-leadership and look at how the system really, that we've been using the code, brought this together. If you have any questions, you're very welcome to ask them in the chat box, and I will, after the masterclass, attend to these questions and the thoughts and your comments. And I really not only welcome them, but really want to ask you to do this, almost a plea, because it's so great for us to learn from you. my busy slides. Here I go. And so just for you who are interested, if you, just to remind you, I'm sure many of you have completed the Neurozone certification course, the online course, 7-week course with us. You would have seen this slide quite a few times and quite a few slides that we use, but remember that this is a really blown up one nerve cell or brain cell in the brain connecting with another brain cell. It's quite fascinating just for interest's sake. It looks a bit like these celestial bodies in the crater, a bit from sort of extraterrestrial, but these are vesicles full of neurotransmitters that are secreted by this particular neuron at this nerve ending where it forms this little button called the button, and that's now secreted into this cleft of the connects with these on the receptors. It binds on the receptors, and then if there are enough binding, and the effect of that leads to the propagation of this electrical current. And these pieces of cereal, of course, are the growth factors. Remember that growth factors really are so useful in the areas of the hippocampus where we learn with to enhance our learning capacity. And soon we'll speak about learning and about knowledge and how do we acquire knowledge and what the implications for the learning organization. So what's the space? But this is just from the first slide. I thought that wise to start with this idea again of business to the brain, just to remind you and me that this is one way that we think the brain works quite comprehensively when it thinks about business. And so you and I use very complicated systems, even complex systems at times, to manage our processes in organizations so that we can work efficiently. But for the brain, I think it's a fairly simple and an easy task. Well, easy is probably in inverted commas, but it's a simple task as far as it's concerned. Very clear directive. We use our knowledge and skills to allocate resources together and to distribute these resources fairly in order to stay alive, survive, and thrive in life. And just to remind ourselves, it's always the we, it's together. We have to distribute the resources fairly, which is a very tough ask, especially if we have even come from different ancestries, different genealogies, and different areas in the world. Our tribes are different. The way we interpret it, what is important in terms of the way we established our value systems, our cultures, they are nuanced, different. And so to work together is a very tough ask in order if we want to do this fairly. But fortunately, we know that the social safety, this need to belong, the need to be together, is fairly generic. So the whole idea of shame and what is important for us as a group to survive, they are generic driving forces. So that helps us to think about fairly in a way that we can come to consensus about it. And as far as that, once we've got that out of the way, we need to stay alive, survive, and thrive in life, which is the axis along which you and I spiral towards thriving. And of course, we need skills and knowledge to do this. We need to be innovative to allocate resources together. So we need innovation, we need learning capacity, we need innovation capacity, and then we need to spiral out along this axis of thriving. Now, along this space, just a bit of, once again, repetition. If you look at this axis, this is now, we call this the so-called implosion performance axis. It sort of goes right from brain-body system implosion right to performance. And this implosion performance axis, which has been called performance axis here, refers to a very important, this is probably at the core of how you and I operate. And if you think about the human body, the brain-body system, you have to think about this idea that we have to be functional, we have to be in a baseline relaxed physiological state, which is this low blood pressure, low heart rate, a state where the system is replenishing, it's ready to perform at its best. The cells are maintained, the inflammation is reduced. Can you see the psychoneuroimmunology? The external environment affects the brain, affects the body. And so mindset and what we internalize and what comes in from the external environment affects our brains, affects our body. And if we have the right mindset that can overcome challenges, we have resilience, it reduces the effect of the immune system so that we actually do not become inflamed. And that's what we want, right? And so then we want to optimize the brain-body system on top of that. And of course, on top of that, we build our very field-specific skill sets and competencies. And also in between, there's a layer of competencies, for example, communication skills that are so important for collaboration. That's one example of skill sets that's also was layered in between those really field-specific skills that you and I learn as an engineer, as a particular leader, marketing, etc., etc. Right. So all of that in business, it's all about this thing, because here's where most people hover if we do not understand and really observe that the organization is a living organism. So if we think about the organization in organizational development, if you think about OD, if you think organization, you have to think systems, and if you think systems, systems manage organizations, and those systems are really working without really acknowledging that we are living organisms. And so if the system continues to work, it keeps the organism, which is a machine, on, and it continues to work. It's very much like any other machine. In time, it will just burn out. And this is burnout. Burnout is where the brain-body system implodes because of the dysfunction and the chronic stress that's just continued as the system is just running us down. And this chronic stress is just the brain-body system analogy or term that we use when we think the machine is on all the time. It's just running all the time. It has to continue running, and the brain-body system does not work that way. It needs to be activated and removed back into a baseline relaxed physiological state. So long story short, this is just a bit of, just to remind ourselves, where does resilience and self-leadership come in? Well, we have a very specific task. The brain-body system, its task is to stay alive, survive, and thrive. It needs to avoid threats. It needs to maximize rewards. It needs to allocate resources along the way to ensure that we stay alive, survive, and thrive. And we do that together because it gives us a better outcome for the finite energy that we can actually assign to the task, which effectively speaks to leadership. And so if we think about that, it becomes quite clear that this system that has this goal-directed goal that needs to achieve, that this system needs to remain in this state above this yellow line. And the way that it does this in an increasingly volatile and increasingly rapidly evolving world is by resilience. Now, before I speak about resilience, I need to remind us that we are complex, adaptive organisms. And what does that mean? It means that you and I innately, without thinking about it, continue to adapt to the environment that we work in or actually breathe and live in. We have to adapt, otherwise we die. And so evolution, if you may, speaks to this whole adaptation. There's microevolution and longer macroevolution. It's just the way that there's small and larger adaptations. We adapt. So what does that mean? It simply means that complex organisms, first of all, actually have to actually learn something from the experiences. And once you've learned from that experience, you learn how to predict what happens in the future. And once you predict, you can adjust. And once you adjust, you actually have a better outcome. The status quo is improved, and you actually have a better outcome, which is called innovation, right? And so the whole idea of innovation, complex problem solving, very dependent on knowledge, very dependent on my capacity for understanding and have a mindset and understanding of what is out there that's good for me and what is not good for me. That's the goal-directed state. And that is effectively allostasis. So allostasis, remember we talked about it last month. Allostasis, just to remind you, is actually at the core, the psychological core and the physiological core of what we call adaptation. So complex adaptive organisms that you and I are, and that you and I are at work. So if we listen very carefully, organizations are complex adaptive organisms. And the way that we as aggregate, as individuals together, we have to adapt very fastly in this rapidly evolving world. We've never been in a more rapidly evolving world. I hope this emphasizes, at least this is an aha moment for me while I'm speaking, is just this once again, just to this lens that all of a sudden you just see, oh my goodness, I understand that this world, that I'm a complex adaptive organism. We as an organization is a complex adaptive organism. As a team, we are a complex adaptive organism. But what we were used to adapt quite slowly because the external environment didn't change that rapidly. Now, all of a sudden, it's incredibly rapid. And we know that it's actually just going to increase and increase. So the rapidly evolving world is going to continue to throw new challenges at us all the time. And so this complex adaptive organism, you and me and our team and our organization, need to be capable of actually absorbing the onslaught, and then overcome that so that we can continue to solve problems and fashion the whole product, so we can continue to allocate resources and stay alive, survive, and thrive in life. This is the most simple way to actually think about it. And that capacity is resilience. And so there's group resilience, there's individual resilience. And if you just look at this slide, what I've tried to, what I gathered from this slide that I took from the internet is that here it talks about teachers and learners and other stakeholders. It could be any one of us. This could just be you and me. So we as complex organisms together we form a complex organism as individuals within groups. We interact with each other. It actually leads to coherent patterns that emerge from the interactions, and this in turn influences subsequent interactions. So effectively, what happens is that we continue to learn to form new patterns that we understand, and new patterns are inferred from the way we collectively work together. This learning leads to new interactions, and so we continue to adapt. Whether this is teachers, learners, organizers, schools, institutions, sports teams. I mean, a fantastic, phenomenal sports team do this all the time, right? They continue to become more and more synchronous and cohesive, but also extremely innovative because of what's happening here. This process is what's the real magic in any team performance. It's also the magic that you and I need in our teams, in our organizations, but at the same time, not only the magic, but this is also the resilience we need to stay alive and thrive in life and survive in between. So I hope this gives a little bit more an appreciation of this idea. In fact, if you just look at you and me from a sort of perspective of I decided to just take this whole microbiota gut-brain axis idea, just to show you just to really impress ourselves again of how complex this whole organism is. These are systems. I mean, here you see gut microbiota. There they are, all these little interesting little structures, and they are inside the gut. And as you know, we have 10 times as many bacteria that we have bodily cells in our body. So from far, you and I are just basically bacterial colonies, right? And these are arrayed, they are all in very complex systems. They're arranged in systems and structured, and they are all in symbiosis. And they are in symbiosis with the body. And all of this together form the brain-body system. And all of them now actually lead to some sort of a status, and here you can see different health status depending on what you eat. But if you think about this idea that this is all a complex adaptive organism, it responds to different things we eat, which leads to a different sort of adaptation. This is just it looks like an in and out, but it's not as simple as that. It's actually way more complicated. Eating something that makes you fat is by far, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. It's oversimplified. There's a process here that takes place that leads to an adaptation. It needs to, so this organism is now well adapted for whatever is coming its way, but the problem is it's going to be overrun very quickly because of the fact that I'm actually overriding its innate resilience for wellness. And there's another example, beautiful picture of the gut wall with all these different organisms that are actually structured, are actually living in our gut. Just an idea that you and I are very complex. And in the same way, our brain cells are complex structured. Everything is a very complex adaptive structure. And because of that, being so alive at work in our teams, and so alive in allocating resources and finding ways of presenting what we have to another and showing them the value and receiving something in return, which we basically receive in money, which we can use so we can actually stay alive, survive, and thrive in life. That whole process is a very complex process. That is just an organic reflection and representation of what is going on in this whole system, right? So it's all one thing. With that perspective, let's then speak about resilience very briefly again. As we said last month, resilience has evolved from this Latin word in some way called resilire, which speaks to leap back. And so it talks about this idea that we bounce back. It leaps back to its original state. And so resilience of an innate object, remember, it returns back to its original state. when you remove the adverse event. And this is the resilience that we see in the Neurozone. I'm not going to repeat everything. It's just the idea that it's bouncing back, but at the same time, very much like allostasis, because it is allostasis, right? We learn from these events and we grow from it so that we can overcome these stressors. And in fact, there's also a general resilience that gives us a higher capacity even for withstanding even some unrelated stressors because of the way that the brain-body system is now has moved into this new state of growth. Remember this idea of homeostasis and allostasis. And then from there, I'm going to move, once we sort of talked about resilience, understanding the construct, being sure that we understand it from this idea of being a complex adaptive organism. Just another final little analysis on this is, once again, this term homeostasis and allostasis. Homeostasis says for bigger systems, there's a balance, there's an in and out that needs to be balanced. The water in and the water out in your system has to be balanced every day, right? So whatever comes in this year has to go out there through many different ways, but it's an equilibrium. This minus that equals zero. Allostasis is not that, right? Something comes in and that goes up. I grow, and I get more and more onslaughts, I grow. So it's a bit like this, right? So you got to grow and this goes up. And as this evolves more rapidly, you're going to continue to learn. This is allostasis. It's the capacity to maintain a set point in changing environments, so I continue to learn from it. It's a very important component, and this underpins resilience. And you remember that I mentioned that knowledge, innovation, complex problem solving are really all part and intricately part of resilience. You can't really separate them. What I'm going to try to convince you of today is that self-leadership really is one of the most important gems that we need to build our resilience. And they are also intricately connected, of course. And so let's talk about self-leadership then. So self-leadership speaks to this capacity of the brain-body system. And I'm going to read you this, this definition, the Neurozone definition. It is to optimize internal resources for sustainable high performance. To apply our own resources for optimal performance. And then I just added a little note this afternoon just to say, we achieve our goals by using available energy for a higher yield. Remember that the brain-body system is innately all about using the finite energy we have to achieve what needs to be achieved. Let me just continue to stress this idea again with you and impress ourselves with it. Energy is finite. If we think about this idea that the sky is the limit, you can do it, let's go and do it, all of these. This is not, it doesn't say about the amount of energy that you have available. What it does say is, it says you can do far more than you think you can do, right? So it's about belief, and it's about motivation, and it's about the energy we assign to a task. But we have to also understand that energy is finite. It's the way the brain-body system works, right? So you and I produce a finite amount of energy, more than we think we have, right? Because that's why it's so important to motivate people to achieve what needs to be achieved. But it's still finite. And our brain-body systems need to use this finite energy, this fuel that it needs, and it needs to apply that fuel and assign it to tasks during the day and in the moment. And it needs to continue to ask a few questions. One is it asks an immediate task of, how much energy do I need to assign to achieve the task? By the way, that underpins belief, right? If I believe this is not possible, I think there's too much energy to be assigned to the task, and I don't have that in the capacity that comes with that. So I'm not even going to attempt. A lack of low optimism, of course, also reduces that capacity, and no wonder that you then can't overcome the challenges that come your way, which is, of course, makes contributed to resilience, that build resilience. At the same time, back to this idea of finite energy, we assign energy to a task to overcome it every single moment of the day. And we also have an understanding of the present and the future based on the past, which is memory. And so what we do is, as we go through life, we understand there are some things that need to be achieved during the day, and innately we assign energy to the task. What we do to achieve our goals is we actually want to achieve this, have the highest yield for the available energy. I sometimes say high yield, low energy, but that probably sort of starts to sound a bit like being lazy, right? But this is not about laziness. It's about using the energy that is available And if you use the lowest amount of energy, you have energy for other things. So in a sense, it is still the lowest amount of energy for the highest yield, because that is actually what we want. And by the way, innovation and problem solving provides you with the capacity to actually achieve higher goals for lower energy input. That is effectively what innovation, that is the underpinning result of innovation, something that makes things easier for us, easier to achieve, therefore more valuable. Therefore, we have put money to it and buy it. So it all makes sense that this idea of self-leadership is very intricately connected with innovation and with the capacity to actually solve our problems and to be a high performer. We achieve our goals by using the available energy for the highest yield. And if you think about, if you look at these definitions, here's another definition that I've just looked at in the articles, what we call the academic articles that we have at our disposal. Two very useful definitions that I want to demonstrate to you. Munzenek, 2004, speaks about self-leadership as a systematic set of strategies through which individuals can influence themselves toward higher levels of performance and effectiveness. Now, doesn't that sound so, it rings such a resonant bell with what we've just said. It is a systematic set of strategies through which individuals can influence themselves toward higher levels of performance and effectiveness. It's said in a very academic way, but effectively it comes down to that you effectively achieve your goals by using your available energy for the highest yield. So it absolutely makes sense from this perspective. So we do like Munzenek, right? Without being biased about it. And then there's the 2005, Houghton and Yo, they explain self-leadership in three primary categories. And this is actually quite practical. But they effectively, for them, it's about achieving the goal despite a few things. So let me just take, before I go to Houghton and Yo, let me just speak to this idea. Back to the previous slide. Achieve goals using available energy for the highest yield. Innately to goals, if you have to achieve a goal, there are always threats and there are always rewards. And the threats, you need to understand that the threats where we are so we can actually move to another state, and the rewards pull us towards the state, right? Threats always push us, it's a stronger force. At the same time, I have energy that I have to assign to the task, which is intricate, innate. So innately there's energy, and there's some cognitive energies that I need to assign to the task. There are rewards that I have to hold on to, and there are these threats and things that are unpleasant that actually that I have to overcome. It's not necessarily only the threat that pushed me away from where I am. It's also this hard work that I need to actually, if I'm going to assign energy, there's some punishment that I have to actually overcome in my mind. So there's this threat, the negative, there's the plus of reward, and there's this cognitive brain processes. And this is what Houghton and Yo speak about. So the first ones they say is through behavior-focused strategies. Behavior-focused, this is all about actually overcoming the unpleasantness of the task, the energy that you have to assign to overcome the negative components of it. Here you can see it's designed to increase self-awareness, leading to the successful management of behaviors involving necessary but unpleasant tasks. So this is overcoming that negative, pushing us away from actually going for this goal. And then the second one is the reward strategies. So we actually have to focus on the reward, and this is the reward side. And then finally, there's this constructive thought pattern strategies, which is said this is the innate capacity. You work with three primary tools for shaping our thinking patterns: the self-analysis and improvement of belief systems, what is possible, mental imagery of successful performance outcomes, and then positive self-talk, optimism, belief. Doesn't this all sort of ring a bell if you know the model of brain performance, this whole goal-directed state, right? So there are numbers of components here within self-leadership that speaks to this goal-directed behavior, the energy and the thrust that helped me achieve the goal. And of course, with that comes this additional component that says low energy, high yield means I understand the environment and what needs to be done so well that I can assign just the right amount of energy to achieve a higher goal. And I know actually innovatively what is the best approach to take so that I don't have to spend all my energy to achieve this task, but I can actually have this 20-80 or the 80-20 rule in place. This is self-leadership defined in two very useful ways. And of course, it also resonates well with the goal-directed behavior. It must be, and also the way we define self-leadership in that sense. So I think we're all in alignment here. Now I'm going to take you back to the brain. what I'm going to do maybe is, and I also think, let's just take one quick, let me see what the time looks like. Yes, we have got 25 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us out of this, where we are now, because I'm going to start to show you now how we use the model and the code to actually look at the correlation, self-leadership and resilience, and how they got together. But I'm first going to just take a few questions. So let me just stop sharing and look at the questions, and then I'm going to go back. Hi, this is Conroy. Yes. What is the relationship between the baseline, the relaxed physiological state, and the relationship between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system? At the same time, I'm thinking about the relationship between eustress and distress and the concept of flow. And the before mentioned relates to resilience and self-management. I think this one is a different one, so I'm going to actually just, oh yes, the flow then. And you just explain flow then, Conroy. Yes, that very difficult name. I just say Mihaly. So Mihaly describe the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind stretch to its limits in a voluntary effect to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. Okay. So let me just take you back to the question. So a few things to be, let's just clean this up from a physiological perspective. The first thing is that a baseline relaxed physiological state is the parasympathetic state. So parasympathetic is our innate state. It means that you and I need to be we are in a baseline relaxed physiological state. We are in a state where the nervous system is not activated to respond to a challenge. It is actually actively busy ensuring that our brain-body systems are maintained in terms of its wellness, reducing all the potential cancer cells and the bad cells in our stuff, and neurodegenerative cells, toxic. It takes away all the toxic stuff. It continues to cleanse and clean and maintain the well-being and the well-being of our brain-body systems. This is a parasympathetic state. And what you see is this is a baseline relaxed physiological state as well. When you have a challenge, the challenge activates my system, provided that the challenge is perceived by my psychoneuro system. So I internalize this information. I actually perceive it as a threat. Once I perceive it as a threat, my brain switches on the whole body through this hypothalamus and the link with the rest of the body through the adrenals and so on. It switches it on. That's called and then it leads to an acute stress state, which is also called the sympathetic state. So there's a sympathetic drive that activates my system so that I can think better. I put more blood in my brain and more blood in my muscles, so I can actually fight or run away. It is that primitive and that archaic. And then I'm ready to respond to the challenge. This is an acute stress. If that stress is not too long or too prolonged or too big, then it's called eustress. U is a good stress. And then the second one, the second thing is that is this bad stress. If it's not eustress, it can actually be distress, and that distress can either be severe stress or it could be prolonged stress. That's typically what we see. So we typically see this prolonged stress. So severe stress can lead to, for example, post-traumatic stress syndrome, where there's an override and a process that actually internalizes it in a semi-permanent effect, which now needs to be turned around by means of medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not going to go into that because we don't have time for that today. But by just understanding that bad stress, distress, continuous stress is bad for the brain-body system. And that's what and that leads to implosion. And that implosion is because of burnout. And that effectively is what's happening if organizations do not actually replenish going to the parasympathetic baseline relaxed physiological state. Flow is a very different thing in our current understanding. And the description of flow, this idea of flow is that this is a really low energy state with high yield. If you really want the low energy, high yield state at work, it is when you are in flow. And this is often where people have got a particular, they work very coherently towards a goal, but with enough capacity and also with enough of a challenge. And once the challenge and the capacity meets one another, And this belief is of such a nature that I can actually overcome this properly, and I can focus well. My system is not actually affected by a number of other things that can distract me. The whole system sort of shuts down around this focal point, and that leads to a state of flow. And so this idea of neuronal flow is a wonderful state. This is actually almost the best, highest performance state that you can be in. It requires an activation from a baseline relaxed physiological state, if I may explain. And it's very well nourishing for the brain-body system, etc. High performance state. And I'm going to stop at that point. Pronounce me, he, she, send me. This is very useful. Thank you. Who was this? Spencer, thank you. Great stuff. I think we should actually, I'm going to immediately copy that so I can actually paste it somewhere else. Thanks so much. All right, well, with that, I hope that explains things a bit more, and also it's useful to understand resilience, because resilience enables us to be continuously capable of activating this system properly and high performance. And then self-leadership, as we said, then just remind us as we go back to this idea of this coherence or this symbiosis between self-leadership and resilience, is that once if I can assign the right energy to the task, the right finite amount of energy for high yield, it means that I can overcome more stressors for longer, which effectively enhances my resilience. I hope that sort of makes sense. It's one very simple perspective to just think about resilience and its relationship with self-leadership. Remember that everything starts in the brain. And it's got to do with what we internalize, how we internalize that information, and then once we've internalized that information, how do we actually overcome whatever challenge is perceived to be present. Everything affects everything. I think we've already said that so many times now today as well. When you think about your whole brain-body system, you think about the psychoneuroimmunological system. Psycho means there's information coming in from the inside. I internalize everything. Let me go one step back. Can I just show you this brain again? Remember that the brain, it always starts with what comes in from the external environment. I internalize information. I'm sitting here looking at this laptop of mine. I'm speaking to you, and I'm thinking a number of things are actually happening in my brain. And the reason it happens is because I internalize information from the outside, and I make internal representations of what is out there. This is of the physical, so I can see the laptop, I see the brain, but I also make internal representations of what I perceive you are doing on the other side, or whether you're listening, or you're engaged, or you disengaged, what are you doing? And that all affects me if I start to think about it, because all of that gives me an internal picture of what I think is going on out there. But this internal picture is the reality. That's the psycho part of the psychoneuroimmunological system. And that activates this whole brain-body system to respond to whatever challenge comes from this internalization. So it's always about what you internalize. The second important thing is, once you've internalized information, you have to assign energy to a task based on the magnitude of the task that is ahead of you, that's the self, and then drive it with the right amount of energy to overcome this particular challenge. This is all self-leadership. Of course, the capacity to overcome it, being knowledge and innovation capacity and a number of other components, in the sense that I'm safe and that I'm actually optimistic that I'll overcome this, that speaks to the resilience. So it's very much internally connected to each other. I hope this little sentence may already put this whole thing so much fixed with each other, that you need a lot of self-leadership. You need the self-leadership and the resilience, and they are very much interlinked to ensure that you overcome challenges and that you continue to remain in this baseline relaxed physiological state for high performance as an individual and as a team and as an organization. To that end, this brain uses a number of behaviors. It actually has a number of qualities and conditions and behaviors that are all part of this code that we call the code for high performance, that we have now worked on for a long time and actually looked at can we correlate these behavioral constructs, the sub-drivers of this high performance state of self-leadership, resilience, but eventually of high performance. And so talking about that, I remind you of the model of brain performance. Just very quickly, for those of you who haven't seen this before, What you see is the outer circle are 10 drivers. They are the drivers of high performance. This is the optimized brain-body system score, if you may. So they all contribute to this. En route to this high performance state, you have these 4 core capacities that you are continuously building: resilience, self-leadership, learning capacity, and innovation capacity. And they are all interrelated. They are effectively one construct in some way or another. You can actually take all of this and just say it's one construct. And in a sense, the way that we behave within these particular drivers, they also combine, if you combine them together, contribute to the construct. So they all affect each other. And if you look very carefully, you'll see that there are lines everywhere. Everything affects everything. But by and large, the behaviors under all these drivers give us 68 sub-drivers. And those 68 sub-drivers, or what we call recommendations, enhances or behaviors, they all work collectively to ensure that these capacities are built. And I'm going to just spend a bit of time on resilience and self-leadership and look at the way that they are actually, that we can combine them, looking at the results of our correlative states. So I'm back to this interesting study that we conducted at Neurozone with 2,500 leaders, mostly in South Africa and the USA. And I'm actually focusing on these 2 particular capacities. It's self-leadership and it's resilience. Maybe just for those of you who haven't seen this, we looked at the strongest and the strongest and the weakest departments across 16 industries. And when it was and learning capacity, self-leadership, resilience, innovation capacity, turnover intentions, job performance, clinic visits were all used. To actually, we looked at these markers. What I want to focus you on is the self-leadership and resilience. And you can see that human resources did the best in self-leadership. Human resources did the best in resilience. IT did the best, did the worst, or were the worst in self-leadership measure capacity. And at the same time, the same IT worst in the resilience. Can you see that here it starts to change a bit? Innovation capacity, there's research development, there's finance doing the worst. When it comes to turnover intentions, IT wants to leave, but marketing and sales are the best in terms of sticking together and making things work. Job performance is higher because of the team that sticks together. The research and development is the worst. So what you see here is interesting. When it comes to self-leadership and resilience, it's the same group. Can you see? Human resources the best, IT the worst, 2,500 leaders across the board here, and the same with resilience. What is even more interesting is that when it comes to not being well, this is when you start to go downhill a bit. Clinic visits, the healthiest. Human resources, the unhealthiest. IT. Can you see that? So I'm not actually talking here about human resources and IT and saying that these are the best and worst departments around. No, no, no. I'm just talking about the relationship, the seeming correlation between self-leadership, resilience, and clinic visits, which speaks to health. And a lot of burnout and the chronic stress is also buried in here. It's there, you can unravel it. It speaks to some correlation here that says if you don't have resilience, your resilience is low, your self-leadership is low, these 2 are correlated, and you have more clinic visits. Now, isn't that fascinating? And so I think that's an important point to make, especially when you think about organizational development, not only for high performance, what does it say about well-being and the readiness for high performance? And of course, you can't actually go and separate those down on the bottom. You can't just look at wellness, and then you look at the other side, you look at high performance. They all are actually in this axis, interrelated in this organism that is operating within the organization. Okay, and so you probably cannot see this, but I'm going to just speak to this quickly. What you see here is what now we've taken all these behaviors that you see within this whole model, and we just put them all together. And we just said, let's correlate this 2,500 people, leaders that we got, correlate all their behaviors with resilience, and this is the collective. This is everybody, and correlated with self-leadership. Okay? And then we said, let's correlate resilience and self-leadership with one another as well. And then we did another study where we looked at the effect on burnout. So I'm going to get back to that as well. I'm going to end up with that. So first of all, we correlated resilience and self-leadership with 2,500 business leaders, and Neurozone Analytics provided us with this interesting correlation. If I say very high, 0.8 is extremely high. So 0.687 on a Pearson coefficient is very sufficient to say that there's a high to very high correlation between resilience and self-leadership in this cohort. No wonder, because we looked at the IT and human resources, right? So we can actually see that there's a correlation. Here you can see what the Pearson coefficient shows. It is the highest of all of these different capacities: learning capacity, innovation capacity, and resilience self-leadership. Resilience and self-leadership, very high correlation. And the significance, I mean, this is just so comprehensive. The significance of the correlation, that we know that this is not a chance effect. Of course, the big numbers provide us with that capacity to show that the chances that this is chance is close to zero. It's so we are very happy. Remember that you want a 0.05 or less p-value, then you are happy. So this is actually phenomenally in terms of its statistical significance when you look at the correlation. Now what we did is, let me go back once again. I'm going to take, so what I did is I took the top behaviors and resilience and the top behaviors that correlate to self-leadership, and I just listed them here for you. So just so you can see, if you look at resilience, the 1, 2, 3, 5, the top 5 behaviors that enhances resilience and is always correlated with resilience is optimism, reducing negative thought patterns, using the generic parts technique, that is breaking up a problem into its smallest little parts, and then ensure that the brain uses its capacity to piecemeal together this crystallized solution for a problem. And then, so this is actually about problem solving. This is a very, very important, having a sense of making a meaningful contribution in the work life. This is all about social safety. And then there's this interesting, very important intermittent fasting that reduces the inflammation in the system, enhances the resilience capacity of your brain-body system. In self-leadership, the top 5 is, once again, the generic parts technique, number 1. Learning techniques, the capacity for understanding, techniques for learning more. So you can actually have a better capacity for understanding how much energy I have to assign, and how do I overcome this problem? Because once again, innovation is part of that, problem solving. Team diversity enhances my capacity for self-leadership. We have seen that this leads to allostasis, by the way, when there's great diversity and great collective creativity. So they're all connected as well. And once again, meaning in work life coming in here. And then being collaboratively competitive as opposed to individual competitiveness. Once again, speaks to the collaboration of the team. Interesting that the team factors here, collective creativity, starts to play a role in self-leadership. And we always knew that self-leadership and leadership were basically more or less the same in one, on a spectrum, right? Forming the same type of construct, said in a different way. And so this is what we see in the correlated behaviors in the system. Generic parts technique and meaning in work life are actually shared by both resilience and self-leadership. Speaks to this capacity for problem solving, for actually ensuring that I know how to assign energy because I know what I need to be doing. And this speaks to the social safety that I have, that ensures that I have this safety within the group context and actually within the workplace, so that I can actually, my system can switch off, move me into a baseline relaxed physiological state, so that I can assign the right amount of energy for the task, and also ensure that I can overcome challenges from that particular baseline. But of course, you can see that these are the 10 top ones, and as we said, 2 shares, so you've got eight behaviors here that work on resilience and self-leadership. Question is if they, and so now, just before I get to that question, now I'm just showing you another study which we did with physicians in the US. So this is the physician study. I can't mention all the names and the details of the study because of the partners we worked with, and I didn't get their approval for that. But I'm just going to show you what we've seen with a number of physicians building resilience. There you see self-leadership. Its correlation with the well-being index. So we did use the well-being index. It says this is the risk. What is the risk that you're going to burn out? And the well-being index is the opposite of that. So the well-being index, the risk that you were going to burn out significantly reduced, and as the self-leadership index increased. And as resilience index increased, it significantly reduced the burnout risk with highly significant statistical significance. Of course, also innovation capacity and learning capacity, also, this is also the correlations here, the coefficient correlation is strong, but you can see that these are the stronger ones, interesting enough. Once again, self-leadership and resilience and ensuring that we do not burn out. So what am I trying to say? Going to the last slide. What I'm trying to say is the following. I'm trying to say that what we've deducted from this masterclass is that and self-leadership are very highly correlated. They are intricately part of the same symbiotic process. You need self-leadership to enhance resilience, and you need that resilience to work on self-leadership because they have this symbiotic effect on each other. You also have this, what happens is once you have this in place, downstairs, you reduce your burnout risk. You enhance your capacity for high performance. You set yourself up for high performance. And of course, we know self-leadership in itself leads to high goal achievement. So it's also the first step into the next phase, which is innovation, capacity, and complex problem solving by using what we've learned through learning capacity. I hope this hour with you has given you some kind of impression of the symbiosis of these two constructs and how we can use this to ensure that we do not burn out, that we reduce chronic stress within organizations as a first and foremost important priority when it comes to organizational development and team efficiency. Right, the team effectiveness. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and just look at some of the questions and thoughts. Oh, the last slide was empty. It was purposefully empty because I actually wanted to just talk to it. And I thank you for observing that. Is that Daniela? Thanks, Daniela. Yeah. Sorry about that. When I saw it was empty while I was speaking, I realized that I should have put something in there. But nevertheless, yes, it was not meant to be. Then, Gavin, just quickly, I'm going to try to answer these questions. 2,500 leader slide. It will be possible to receive the slide grade sales tool. Yes, we can definitely prepare something for you. Please, Lynn, just remind me. We should ask the code people to prepare a slide for us. Can you please make a note of that? Thank you so much. I'm curious about the following. This is, hi, Steve. Great to see you. I hope you're well. I presume that you are still in Phoenix. I hope the weather is good there. I'm curious about the following. Even in its relaxed physiological state, the brain is the ultimate pattern maker and reinforcer. Always taking information, evaluating in relation to previous information. It seems the brain's bias to confirm patterns it has previously seen. Over time, the patterns become habituated and part of our subconscious automatic thinking. It seems to me that the key to self-leadership is to pay attention to these patterns and become more aware of patterns that we want to shift in order to thrive. Yeah, this is, Steve, transformational coaching speaks to that. It speaks to mindset. Please comment and share your thinking and insights about this process of shifting our mindset to adapt and thrive. Okay, so in short, I think we need to speak to this in the next masterclass, really. I think we really need to pay attention soon about this idea that the information that you and I internalize is actually internalized and forms part of our memory systems based on what we deem important. So the value we assign to incoming cues is based on our understanding of what is important in life, which is a mindset. So the moment you've got a certain mindset, you start to reinforce that mindset by means of the information that comes in, because it actually hooks onto those most important things that you assign a value to. And a mindset and a belief system and the worldview are all about what is more important than another. And once we've done that, we start to reinforce our mindset. And then within this mindset, we actually use that mindset to solve our problems and fashion our products. And exactly to your point, self-leadership then says, how much energy do I have to assign? I'm assigning energy to tasks to overcome it with the lowest energy and the highest yield. I've got a thrust that motivates me to achieve these goals, but it's always within this mindset. And so if you really want to do something very deeply different, if I have a mindset, a non-resilient mindset, for example, I don't adapt quickly, I've got a fixed mindset, I have inherently, I'm an individually competitive individual, so every mistake is grave, leads to my demise, and so I'm actually not willing to iterate quickly, make quick mistakes, and actually continue to adapt. Those kind of things, they're so important today. if I have those in my mindset, fixed in my mindset, I have to start to work on those constructs. So I think the question here, Steve, is more about what we need some consensus about what is a mindset that we need for today. What is a resilient mindset in 2018 or 2019? And in 2019, second half, we have to once again have a consensus about what is the mindset that is needed for us to thrive at our best in this rapidly evolving world. And that's require visionary leaders and leadership that says this is the consensus of what is needed. Then we need to start to work you can work with me as your coachee and say, Etienne, what are the things? Let's talk about these things because I want to understand what your thinking is and the way you perceive the world in terms of these important things that we actually want to achieve in you. And if there's a gap, we need to start to work on that gap. So I'm individually competitive coming from the 80s world, industrial world, IQ world, Spearman's G. There's only one prize, the rest are just losers. What a terrible world it is now, but then it might have had its value. But now we can't afford that anymore. We need to be collaboratively competitive and be able to make mistakes and reiterate. So somebody had to work with me in my mind to change that mindset so that I can actually become more collaborative, competitive, and happier to make mistakes. Understand that certain mistakes, of course, coming from a medical world will lead to death, and that still remains grave. So I assign the right value to those kind of constructs. But when it comes to being innovative in a group and a team, I must be able to actually collaborate and make mistakes. Steve, I hope that I'm just sharing some thoughts with you on this because I think it's so important to really have consensus about mindset, and then we can start to shift that mindset. I'm not a mindset expert, but this is just some thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well, Steve. Maybe you want to pop me a mail because we don't have time today, but it will be great to hear your thoughts on that as well. Thank you very much for that. Patty, request, please, can you send us a self-leadership definitions used in the talk? Yeah, Patty, this is all on the, yes, we can. I think it's going to be, we do have this actually in the course, but not the self-leadership definitions. How do we do this? Selena, I'm going to leave it to the back office to think about this because this is being recorded. So you can actually record it and photo screenshot it. We've now got so many people who are requesting things from us from the back office that I can't actually get my back office to send everything anymore. We are inundated with work. So I'm going to try to ask you to actually just use the recording and then just forward it to that particular slide and just take a screenshot. If that's okay, Patty, we'll see if we can do something else about that, but I think Celine made a note. Okay, then otherwise you can pop it to you. Flow highest return, Peter Wormsley. Flow highest return for leads. In fact, you know what? Patty, I'm going to actually prepare from now on. We'll prepare the slideshow in such a way that we'll actually put that on the toolbox as well. So for those of you who are Neurozone certified coaches, and early specialists, you will have access to the toolbox and you can then access that particular number of slides that will be available in terms of definitions and so forth. Let's do that. Okay. And I think that's a good one. Thanks, Patty. Thanks for that. And then Peter, flow highest return for least effort. Can you talk to dreaming and intuitive brain engagement? Also best work done in the shower. Okay. Okay. So just a few things on that. This speaks to this idea of daydreaming or dreaming and intuitive power engagement. This idea of the shower all speaks to mind wandering, Peter, in my understanding. And mind wandering you should see as the brain's capacity for releasing its focus on this one area in the brain, in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and opening up its space and allowing spatially more information in time to come through to that particular area. It's actually about more solutions coming to the consciousness. So then you have more consciousness, solutions to the consciousness that can then come to the consciousness, and the most elegant solution that suits your tribe in your brain that will make it adaptive is the one that you will then come up with when you're under the shower, because that's when your mind wander. When you have purposeful daydreaming, it once again opens up the space. It's called the spatial process in the brain, so that you actually can have the unconscious solution comes to the consciousness. I hope that explains that question. So flow is something else. That's where you are in a state of actually working towards a goal, and the brain is actually quieted down around this very particular area of focus. I hope that explains that. Yeah, great, great. Thanks. Great question. Nice to think together with you on that. I really appreciate it. And then I think we have run out of everything here. A request. Yes, that's all done. Just checking that I've not. Okay. And we've run out of time. So thank you very much for your participation and for being with us today. Such a great masterclass. I learned so much from this and from you, and I really thank you for that. I'm absolutely so appreciative. And have a wonderful month. Until we see each other next month, we will let you know what this will be all about. And if there are things that you really feel that you really want us to talk about in relation to the brain-body system, to a particular outcome in the organization, you're also very welcome to let us know if there's something. And we would love to pay attention to that as well, because that's a way that we continue to be relevant within the world of your integrative practices. So please let us know. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.